Welcome to the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
Here we aim to provide you with the experience, strength, and hope of professionals actively working on the front lines in the field of food addiction.
The purpose of this summit is to educate you and increase overall awareness about food addiction as a disease with abstinence as the solution.
Every day for the month of October, we are sharing one inspiring speaker or highlighted food preparation video from the incredible Tony Vassallo of Moda Nutrition Inc. and the Real Food Revival Movement.
We have 4 weeks of interviews with the leaders in the field of food addiction, clinicians who are working on the front lines, registered dietitians and nutritionists that are working toward bridging the eating disorder and food addiction camps, and people just like you and me.
Here we talk about all things food addiction recovery. Most importantly, how to thrive rather than just survive.
So stay positive, make a change for yourself, tell others about your change, and hopefully the message will spread.
And as Vera always says,
the power is ours.
Welcome, guys, to the final day of the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit. You get us, Clarissa and I, your hosts for the Food Junkies podcast. And so we just wanted to give you the opportunity to get to know us a little more. And so I'm just going to kick it right off and ask you, Clarissa, how do you work with clients? What works best? What doesn't work? Kind of give us a picture of when people come to work with you, what does that look like?
Well, we usually start off with talking about abstinence in the food plan. That's usually the first 30 to 60 days. You know, we're working on craving management strategies, abstinence, withdrawal. What does that look like? How do we manage it? I actually have clients who have access to me. So like we'll meet for an hour, but then they email me daily or maybe they text me and I want to be there to help support them. And so that's just part of what I do to help make them successful because I know food requires a much more intensive treatment strategy, especially in the beginning when it's so acute. And so I really only take on a few new clients at a time because I want to make myself available to these individuals. So 30, 60 days, we take the time we need to focus on getting abstinent one day at a time, one meal at a time, 1 hour at a time, whatever it takes. And then we kind of, once we get the food in check and we find like the right fit with the food plan, which, as we know from watching this summit, everyone is different and it's actually not so much about the food. But when we do find what's a good fit for us, then we kind of move into the other issues. Is it like codependency? Is it a routine? We all benefit from having a routine in recovery. Is it, is it emotional issues? What does our life look like? Why did we use food in the first place? And once figuring that piece out, what is this need that we have that's not being filled? And what are some new coping strategies we can learn? What do our relationships look like? I work from a very holistic perspective. So we're going to examine like the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual pieces of our life, see which ones we neglect, because we all, everybody preaches balance, but at the end of the day, we know balance is BS. We do some things well, we do some things not well. The things we don't do well, we have to schedule and get them in there. And most of the time, it's really about teaching individuals to fight for their recovery, ask for help when they need it, get honest, and find a community. So the people who do well use the services that I offer. They text me all the time. They email me. They tell on their disease. And they find a community. They connect with others so they see they're not alone. That is what I think in the individuals I work with, that's what I see when they do well. What probably doesn't work well is, staying on the Instagram, looking for more information, seeking that magical fix, attending all the summits, but not with the lens of addiction. The food is confusing. The information out there is wrong. You need to just really focus on the disease of addiction. And sometimes even within our field, I think it can be confusing because somebody's keto or somebody's carnivore, and that's the only way. And that's not the only way. We really need to like shut off all that noise and focus on what's true for us. And I think that that is the benefit of working with somebody one-on-one. You really get encouraged to say, to be prompted to say, well, is that true for you? And I think that those individuals who really try to make addiction an organic, like recovery, an organic process in their life, those are the ones that are successful. And that acceptance piece is huge. We all know that, right? You have to wake up and you have to find a way to do things for your recovery every single day, especially in the beginning, because it's very acute. So you need acute treatment for it. Your life's not always going to be like this. You're not always going to have to do all of these things, but in the beginning, yes, you do. And so again, what doesn't work well is just thinking about your disease. You have to act on this disease. And those who take those actions, they're the ones who do well. So I will ask you, Molly, the same question. What is it like when clients work with you? What do you find works well? And what do you find is not so helpful?
Yeah. So I always kind of give people a similar overview of what it's like to work with me. And it's very similar to yours, right? We know that there is a solution when it comes to addiction, and it doesn't matter what outlet it shows up as. It could be methamphetamine, the same as it could be the food. And we know the solution is a biopsychosocial spiritual solution. And that looks like, 10% is really about the food and the eating behaviors. There's a good 40% that is about the psycho-emotional side of things, right? So this is where we're going to increase peace and increase resilience. We're going to give you tools if you don't have them and the skills to use those tools. We're going to look at stress management, emotional management, those things that are lacking, like you were saying, for sure. And then, 50% of it really is community and connection. It's, because, and this is like anecdotal totally, but I've been working in substance abuse and mental health since 2005. And the top 3 reasons that people come to me when they've returned to use are death, injury, and illness. And the number one factor that any of my clients, whether it be sexual assault, whether it be gambling addiction, meth addiction, mental health in general, the number one thing that those folks who are successful in their recovery have is quality support. And that is everything from the people that live in the same house as we do, all the way to, and they don't have to have the same disease as we do, but we need those people on our support team. But then also having that core group of people that we can show up with, and we don't have to over explain ourselves. We can just show up on a Friday at my Sugar Sober support meeting and just be like, I can say the thing, and I don't have to like try to minimize it or explain it away when somebody is like, but it's just food. Like, these people are not going to say, but it's just food, because they get it. So I would say, that's, I always give people kind of that overview, but then, I offer different levels of services as well. And those people who use the services in the way that they're intended do seem to do better. So I have like an intense program where I do work with people for 90 minutes a week. We meet for 60 minutes and then a follow-up of 30 minutes. And it just kind of helps us to have more touch points throughout the weeks. For 8 weeks, I do work one-on-one. As we go along in somebody's program. I'm now offering small group coaching, and it's not curriculum based. It's just, hey, we're going to show up on a Thursday. There's going to be 4 to 6 of us, and we're going to show up and say, this is the thing that I'm working on. And then peers are going to get an opportunity to weigh in, but also all those people that are there are going to hear the same stuff, right? I am only going to have to say it one time to 6 people, right? And then we can have that back and forth. So yeah, I think that there are lots of different, like you said, we're learning on this summit that there are lots of different ways that we can work with clients. There's lots of different solutions or food plans or whatever, but the solution remains the same. It's biopsychosocial spiritual. That connection, community is a huge piece of this. And that when we do the action, when we take the action, we don't just sit around and like hope that it's going to change by osmosis. People are successful. Yeah. So, thinking about that, what is something that you believed early on working with clients that you did maybe in the beginning, 3, 4 years ago, maybe longer ago, that you don't do today? Like, what's changed?
So I would definitely say the focus on the food plan. Like I was really rigid in what I believed people could eat, what I believe people, this was based on the training, some of the training I received. And then when you start working in the field, you start to determine that some of these foods aren't actually having that psychoactive effect on people's brains. And, that I definitely started not thinking so, uh, I wasn't so scared of the grains anymore, which I think originally I was in the beginning. And I also feel like I had a much more rigid approach to when people had slips in the beginning. But then after so many years of working in the substance use field with drugs and alcohol and having a harm reduction approach, I started to blend my previous clinical knowledge into food addiction, which just made so much more sense. And I think and if anything, it makes the most sense for food because we have to eat food and we are bombarded with it all the time. And that self-compassion piece is just so important in this. And that, you know what? There's going to be slips. It's going to be an imperfect recovery. And just, reminding the individual we're working with that this is just part of the process. And with food, there's so much more experimentation. I think I was a lot more afraid to experiment when I first started working in the field. And I've learned like we've got to really be specific to the person that we're working with and see what's true for them, because everyone has different trigger foods. Everyone responds differently to, even allergies, we know, with like dairy, etc., all of that. So it's really just about helping the client realize that their body is going to tell them what is a good food for them. And then once we figure it out, like just eat that stuff and let's move on. Let's start treating the disease. And so I think that for me, that is definitely some of the things I've become a little bit more flexible with. How about yourself? Like, what did you find when you first started working in the field? And then like, how is your practice different now?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question because having also come from that substance use disorder, process addiction, mental health world, really kind of shifting gears into the like really niching down on like this is the population that I want to work with, mostly right because it's our own personal story, probably. Um, it's so funny because I actually came into it very flexible, looking at it like treating it as I would any other addiction or mental health concern. And then I started doing the specific training and I started listening to some of the stuff that was out there. And I think I started questioning myself. And so I think I got scared that I was somehow doing this wrong. I got really rigid on some things that didn't really quite sit right with me. And then over time, I think I got rebellious and I'm like, nope, screw this. I'm going back to what is true for me because it resonates and lands with the clients that are attracted to working with me and again, who are doing well. So I think there was some self-development I think that had to happen for myself in that personal growth area of just being able to like trust myself again. Like, nope, it's okay. Like you know how to do addiction because it's just addiction. It's one disease, many different outlets, and thank God for Bitten Johnson, for saying like, listen, this is addiction interaction disorder or cross addiction. Like this is no different than any other thing. And I think once that clicked for me, I was able to go back to that more flexible space and not to have so much fear, like you were saying, like around, fruits or grains or, anything, whatever, food in general, and just being willing to like experiment with like, adding in foods versus always thinking about taking things away, not being so fearful that somebody's going to lapse or slip or return to use because they, are eating out at a restaurant, things like that, or that they're not taking their scale with them to every single event or whatever it might be. So I think yeah, just learning again to not only trust myself, but to like really put my trust back in my, put trust back in my clients that like, listen, they are the expert in them. I'm not the expert in them. I have to follow their lead and support that. And then if it doesn't work out for them, know that I'm not going to stand there and say, haha, I told you so. But that, because that would never be something I would do. But to just be there and say, okay, well, so what now what, as Marty Lerner has said, right? Like what went well, what didn't go so well, what am I taking with me and what am I leaving behind? So, I mean, I think that, I think the biggest thing that I would just want to say is like, I have been humble enough to know that I was wrong, that I have new information now and I'm doing something different. And I still reserve that right to be wrong. And I still reserve that right to change my mind, but to know that I'm just going to show up and meet you where you are because that's the best way I find to be the most flexible with my clients and have the best effect with them. So yeah, I mean, thinking about that, those changes that you've made over your time working with clients over the last few years, specifically in food addiction, what works best, what doesn't work so well, what do you feel like you bring to the table? Like, what do you bring to the field of food addiction that feels unique? Knowing, the other professionals that we do know, of out there, what's unique about Clarissa?
Well, I think that, first of all, I think part of what helped me be more comfortable with what I already knew was meeting you. And like having somebody with that clinical background of working with other substances validating that, hey, what we were doing before is absolutely applicable here. And I think that is one of the things that is unique about us is we are trained in addiction already. We have separate degrees in it. So we went through, how the brain works previously, solution focused counseling, taking course on problem solving skills and how to treat clients with the disease prior to food and be able to apply those to working with clients with food addiction. I mean, obviously, I think most individuals in this field have struggled with food addiction. I think what's unique for me is I definitely can identify with the eating disorder aspect of it and having some level of exercise addiction, body dysmorphia, and seeking treatment and still always helping clients figure out new ways to explore these issues as well. Interestingly enough, the individuals that are attracted to working with me tend to have both, and we need to sort out like which piece of the puzzle do we need to address first? And, the part of, I think, that restrictive food plan in the beginning was, now I see it very differently. Thank you to David Wiss, identifying this, still food addiction can have diet culture pieces if we are still always focusing on the weight and having this rigid restrictive food plan which makes us a good person. Like, yeah, no, we need to see that for what that is, and that is not recovery. That's not eating disorder recovery. That's not food addiction recovery either. So I think for me, I feel like it has just been this journey for me to get here with having like the social work piece as well. So we can talk about the other issues and have that previous education on how to address all the other issues that we're dealing with, having that addictions degree so we can specifically address the issues of addiction. And then I also have some culinary from my hospitality degree. So it's like it was probably meant to happen that I was to work in this field. I didn't know it, but I think my higher power knew it. And so it's all kind of come together in a way where I get to work with individuals, love what I do, and like just have the skills that I need to be able to help support them. How about yourself? What do you think that Molly Painshop has in the food addiction world that makes your services unique, or what do you bring to this field?
Yeah, I mean, I think a little of what you said, like having that, I mean, I have a master's degree in mental health counseling. I started out working in the field in 2005 with specific to substance use disorder, criminal thinking, behavior change, really got into the sexual assault world, suicide prevention, right? So really running the gamut of mental health concerns. If it's in the DSM, I've probably worked with it in some way, shape, or form since 2005. So having that clinical background, knowing that I am licensed, I'm a dual licensed clinician. I have oversight by multiple boards because of licensure. I'm a member of many associations and am held to certain ethical standards that not everybody in this arena is held to. So I think I bring just a level of professionalism and experience that we're working to achieve for others, right? We're working to, and that's future projects that you and I are both working on for sure, to help bring others up behind us, but setting that bar maybe for some sort of standard for this profession. But I think the other part of it too is that I have never, and nor will I ever, fire a client for coming to me and being sick. Right. So when clients come and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that I screwed up. I'm sorry to tell you, like, I keep eating the processed foods. I keep eating my drug foods, or I just can't get it right. And they have this, there's just so much guilt and shame behind it. And I will never fire a client for that. Like, I'm not going anywhere. As long as you're willing to keep showing up and trying, I'm not going anywhere. Right. And I think that they have had experiences with medical professionals, with family members, with 12-step groups, with other support groups, with you name it. They've probably had the experience of being fired in some way or being sick. So that's not something that I will ever do. And I it's just a belief that I carry and have always carried. I mean, I've worked with some pretty dangerous individuals and didn't fire them, even when I felt like maybe I should for my personal safety, but I didn't. And I remember my husband always being like, you're not scared enough. And I'm like, I don't know. But I think I bring that to the table, but I also think that I don't know. I don't want to, it's so hard to answer this question because I'm just not that person that likes to be in the spotlight, but I do try really hard on social media, Instagram specifically, to bring attention to food addiction as a real thing. And you and I were both on the committee that submitted to the World Health Organization for acceptance into the ICD for food addiction to be recognized as a real thing. And I think we bring that to the table, so I think that there's so many things that we bring that are unique. We have our own personal stories, but we also have that professional piece. We're dual hat or, two hatters, as is often referred to in the business, where we have personal and professional. We have personal stories and we have professional backing. And that is a unique experience when you have a provider that is a two-hatter. So that's what I would say. And certainly I'm happy to discuss more if anybody has any specific questions around that kind of thing.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So do you work with harmful users? And being a dual hatter, do you have your own therapist?
Yes, both. So I will work with I have people call me all the time. Listen, I don't know that I'm an addict, but I can see that this sugar issue, food issue is a thing. So absolutely. I have clients that, are worried about their binge eating behavior. I have clients that, and you know what I mean? Just like binge eating behavior in general. It's not even specific to any kind of food. I have clients who just want to stop using sugar so much. I absolutely have my own therapist that I think that's, again, if I'm not willing to buy what I sell, then who am I? Right. And I think that should be true for any professional. Again, I feel like that's a standard, it's a red flag to me if a professional in the profession, your own doctor can't write their own script if they need an antibiotic. They have to go get it from another medical professional. The same should be true for us. So yes, I do not discriminate. You can be a harmful user all the way to severe addiction. And I will meet you wherever you are on that spectrum. You can be the worried well. I don't care. If you want my help and you think we're a good match and I think we're a good match, absolutely give me a call. How about you?
Oh yeah, true for both. I just wanted to clarify because I know sometimes, and there is certain individuals in the field that, they just want to work with the food addicts. But I think, that harmful user, if they continue to use, they will become the food addict. Well, prevention is a better way to help always rather than reaction, right?
Agreed.
I couldn't agree more that I just feel like creating the awareness, you know, you don't, this is nothing to be shameful of. We know that society is full of drug foods. So if you're struggling, like, yeah, and it might still be about the weight, let's just look at like how we can start reducing the amount that you're consuming. And then what does life look like for you? And I guarantee it's going to be better. And yeah, of course, I have my own therapist. Everyone should have their own therapist. I'm telling you that it makes life better too. So cutting down sugar, getting a therapist, all good things for anyone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we always used to say when I worked in corrections, there's no such thing as a wannabe. They are all gonna be's. And the reason why we would say that, right, is because prevention is the ultimate, right? Like prevention is the ultimate cure. It really is, because if we can prevent it from increasing in severity, whether that be gang life, which that's what we were talking about, or the sugar thing, we are in much better shape than we would have been. I don't believe you have to be a certain level of have a certain level of illness in order for it to be treated. And so I think, you're right on the money. Like, we need to get out there and prevent it. We need to stop it sooner than later. I'd rather have somebody show up as a mild severity level, right, and say, I want to stop this now, or figure out how to prevent it from becoming worse, than to have people that can't get abstinent for more than one meal at a time. Not that I'm not working with those folks, and not that I'm not happy to, but I bet that those same people, and we've heard them on this summit, right? And I'll call them out. I'm willing to bet Marla would say the same thing. Hey, let's catch them so much sooner. Why should they have to be at the level that I'm at before they get help? Right? Any of the speakers that have shared today. So absolutely. So you kind of alluded to it earlier, talking about like the services that you use, community and connection, but have you noticed in your clients that seem to do the best, what are the characteristics, or what secrets to success do you feel like they have?
Yeah, I don't think there's one secret to success. I think acceptance of like seeing these foods as drug foods, just the same as an alcoholic seeing any alcohol as a drug. I think that's important. I think giving up the fight to trying to be normal, that's a huge piece. And it's just like, as soon as you do, it's just like, and then empowering yourself and being able to stand up to other people and just being like, that's not my food. And like, I'm not here to judge, but you shouldn't eat that either. Like, there should be no shame about when they are able to drop that shame and just be like, wow, my life got so much better when I stopped eating these foods, that I'm just so proud of this life I get to live now, that, yeah, you don't have to go around telling everybody, because nobody likes that. But at the same time, be okay to speak about it when people ask you about it. I think you can only get there by having that community of people who think the same way as you, right? They say you're like as close as your top 5 people that you spend time with. So if you're spending time with all these normal people and they are looking and criticizing and judging what you're doing, you're going to do the same thing. So get involved. It doesn't have to be 12-step, but it can be 12-step. That route works really well. Just find your right fit. It's like dating. You just need to go and figure out like, oh, wow, this meets my needs. This is really attractive to me. This, I don't know if I can live with. All of those kind of things you need to look at when you start this program. But when you find your community, you will know, because you're like, these are my people. This is where I have been waiting. This is what I've been waiting for. Finally, I don't have to lie. I don't have to like pretend to be somebody else, which is exhausting. And most of us have been doing that all our lives, right? Just pretending to be, wearing this mask all the time. Everything is fine. I don't struggle like that. What? No, get with people you can be authentic with, and then just like also like people that bring you joy, people you look forward to seeing. Like community is huge for sure. And also having your house a safe place. The people that do so well that I work with, their house where they spend most of their time, where they used to eat all their drug foods, is a safe place for them. They've removed it. They get their family on board. You know, I will even definitely meet with client spouses and we'll have a little conversation. And it might be a bit of an intervention on the spouse's part, right? Like, why does that spouse need this stuff if you know, because we all just need to be supported. But there is nothing better when I can sit in my house or when clients can sit in their house and there's nothing in there that's making the noise. They can just sit and just be. And also I would say anyone who kind of develops that gratitude practice and they're able to get quiet, because I think when we get quiet, we hear what we need to hear about what we really need, that we have been, you know, distracting or eating over. How about you, Molly? What would you say is like some secrets to success that you've noticed in your clients?
Yeah, so I would echo everything you just said, especially like the self-compassion piece. You know, like the mindfulness piece, but like being really mindful in that gratitude, but then like having that self-compassion to allow that, right? Instead of letting negative self-esteem or bad self-esteem like really just drag us down. So I would say people who are able to figure out that self-compassion piece as well. But it's like I don't know, I just always get this little feeling when we can use that. Oftentimes when people have the disease of addiction, we feel like the black sheep, right? We're the only ones, or seemingly we are the only ones who really struggle and just can't get it together for one reason or another. And I find that when people can use that power for good, they get sassy or rebellious in a positive way, it's like the tables get flipped, in that no longer are we the victim of circumstance. No longer is, oh, woe is me. And, oh, the big food is out to get me and it's everywhere with its marketing. I mean, that's all true. But we don't have to continue to buy into that system, right? We don't have to continue to have that consumerism or commercialism, you know, whatever mentality. We can actually flip it on its lid and be like, yeah, not for me, you know, whatever. Like when we get sassy back at it and we use, you know, our previously described stubbornness, you know, or whatever, in some way it was negative, we can use that in a positive. We can really be stubborn and say like, no thanks, red dog, sugar demon, whatever in my brain, no thanks. Like we spend our whole life pushing back against teachers and parents and people of authority and rules in general when we have this disease. Sometimes, not always, but you know, whatever. Why not push back against that whatever in our head, you know, and find different ways around it? And so when people get confident in themselves and they find that center and they get sassy with it, I find, you know, they really shine, you know, they're able to push through. So I would definitely say those would be like factors that I've seen too. So thinking about what people do well with, what do you think is like kind of the biggest struggle your clients run into?
I think the focus on the weight is probably one of the biggest struggles. And, you know, if the weight's not coming off, they're not trusting their recovery, they're not trusting their food plan, and maybe they're not trusting me. And so one of the number one things we have to do is just work towards stop making that the focus, because the weight will come off. It will. If you continue to eat this way, you will drop some of the weight. But in the meantime, this is the part I love, is like everyone's so focused on the weight. And then like 3-6 months later, they're not even thinking about the weight. They're like, my life is just so great. My food is just so great. Like I just enjoy waking up. My sleep is better. My thinking is better. And it stops being about the weight, but yet the weight is still slowly at the right pace, not diet, drop 10 pounds in a week, continues to fall off. And that's just a symptom of recovery. But definitely, I find the struggle being, and for me, a lot of the individuals I work with, they do have some level of eating disorder. And so it's easy for us to want to get a little bit more restrictive and like keep trying to tighten up that food plan and like just be so easily we're so vulnerable to messages out there in diet culture and body image. And body image can really play a part in a slip or in a lapse, because you're like, I'm never going to be the body I want, because you won't be, because you'll get to that body and there's still going to be work. You're still going to want something different, and you're not going to be happy. It's not getting to that size. It's not the happy place. If I look at my smallest, I was the most miserable of my life, but I finally had the body I want, but I was starving, irritable, lost my period, all of the things. And I was isolated, just as isolated in the eating disorder as you are in addiction. So because that's the only way you can get there, is you cut everyone and everything out of your life and focus on this body. So I think the biggest struggle is still, that. And the biggest struggle also being that it's just a bit of that still shame and guilt that exists. But I loved what you said, and it's like you just have to own it and just be like, I feel like people around me now are afraid that they're eating the drug foods. People are like diving down the aisles in the grocery store when they see me coming. I'm not there to teach them how to eat better, but it shows me that when you own your recovery, you could just walk and stand tall. And it's pretty much everybody in this world has an issue with food because it's created to be that way. So anyways, I'll stop. I got really excited there. So what about you? What do you find is the biggest struggle?
Yeah, I think it's diet culture in general, right? So it's everything from the weight and the body image and the stigmas around, especially right now with COVID and, oh, did they have underlying conditions? Well, look at them, they're fat, right? Like we're having all kinds of body shaming, size shaming. Everything is happening right now, right? Because people are angry about what's happening and reasonably so, but to know that culture is so ingrained in our lives. And so it's that culture in general, right? So a lot of folks will be like, so holidays are coming up, right? And so I'm just wondering what that will mean for me, right? And I'm like, I'm confused, right? So the question ends up being like, do I get a break? Do I get to take a day off from this plan in order to enjoy the holidays? And so really like having those conversations of like, there's no such thing as a day off, right? We don't get to have a cheat day or a cheat meal, right? And so that is a stumbling block for a lot of people. I also think that as time goes on and we remove the drug foods and they are starting to have that weight loss, if they have weight to lose or they're starting to feel better, whatever, they quickly forget, and it all of a sudden gets treated like a diet again. And so then they forget, oh wait, there are actually like real issues that have to be addressed here, because again, if we're looking at an iceberg, the weight and the food, right, are like the tip of the iceberg we can see, and everything else underneath it is what we actually have to address. And so they forget that part. So I would say those are the biggest stumbling blocks. Yeah. So I think that, diet culture, absolutely. But then like, if it's not diet culture, I find that my clients, if they're able to put down the food, the drug foods, whatever those might be, the next big struggle that they often have is volume. And so I was wondering, do you experience volume addiction with your clients or as a struggle? And if so, how do you help them?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Volume is definitely something that, we put down the drug foods and then we're still trying to see some kind of fix from a certain quantity of food. And, we've heard from Joan Kent about the stretching of the stomach and the serotonin that we get, and even just the habitual ritual of chewing and how, good that can feel. And that before, that habit took away a lot of our pain. And so the number one thing I do with individuals that struggle with volume, we focus on a mindful eating practice. And this gets overlooked all of the time. And yet it is the number one thing that the clients I work with that struggle with volume, they practice. So yes, we weigh and measure to make sure we're getting the right amount of food and shutting that noise off. But then we've got to have, what does our practice look like? Are we doing our 10 deep breaths, grounding ourselves? Are we sitting at the table? Are we eating with a fork and a knife? Are we pausing in between meals? Making sure this process is 20 minutes, avoiding all the distractions, having a bit of a closing ritual at the end of the meal. And if we're having that voice say to us, I still want more, addressing that and saying, like, you get more. We're going to eat again at this time. And and having like something great to look forward to after that next meal, or something that is non-food related, but moves us into that next period, whether it's going outside for a walk after, exiting the kitchen. Those kind of mindful practices, that's what make people successful. For the individuals I work with, is really, we often associate mindful eating with intuitive eating, and it really needs to be more of an addiction practice, I believe, especially when it comes to food. How about yourself? What is your experience with volume addicts?
Yeah, I agree. So I definitely have that issue with clients as well, the volume piece. And so, yes, weighing and measuring to know that it's enough food. But then, right, that voice is still there. So even if we like put it on the smaller plate, or we, try to make our bowls pretty or whatever it is, right, that voice is still there, that it's never enough. And so weighing and measuring to know that we have enough. But then also that mind, like you said, the mindful eating practice, the 10 deep breaths, the switching, utensils with into our non-dominant hand, those kinds of things. But I mean, I'm a big believer in what David Wiss often talks about. It's not just what we eat, but it's also when and how we eat, right? So those timed meals, so that we're not getting overly hungry, right? Knowing that sometimes volume can also look like grazing or snacking. So I like to tell my clients, listen, we want that experience to be about 20 minutes. We don't want it to be much longer than that. Because we can get into that grazing territory. And we don't want to be shorter than that, because then we're like inhaling our food and we're not really like enjoying the experience. Now, I think you and I, when we were in Vegas recently, I think our meals definitely lasted longer than 20 minutes because we were just so engaged in conversation. And I think that's totally acceptable for sure too. But when we're eating alone, which many of us often do, sitting at our desk, in our cars, whatever, because we're on the job, on the clock, whatever, having that 20 minutes kind of as a nice little like loving limit around mealtime, I find to be super beneficial. I also agree with the mindfulness thing, that it needs to be a part of recovery. And I think Marty Lerner even talks about that in his Smurf, his Smurf outline, because when we are eating the way that we have been eating, not only in what we're eating, but how we're eating and when we're eating, it's been mindless, right? It's just been by the seat of our pants, doing whatever, and it's been chaotic. And our stomach hasn't had time to tell our brain, hey, we've eaten. We haven't enjoyed it the way that we need to enjoy it. Our brain is already wired to double down on dopamine hits for food and sex. We should be enjoying it in the moment. So I really feel like mindfulness brings us back to center again. Like, it's all about, when we're in addiction, we're so, we're worshiping external things, right? And when we are in recovery, we come back to center, and, it's that higher ordered thinking. It's that good, orderly, direction, as they say in programs sometimes. When we come back to center and we can be mindful and just right here in the moment, we're less likely to have that addictive pathway reignited.
Yeah. And if we are food addicts, why are we not giving our meals the time they deserve? right? Because the brain needs to see the plate, needs to recognize this is a quantity that I get to eat. And it will then process that you are taking all of that in. That helps fullness. This speed eating, this, I can have a huge salad, my complete allowance for my meal. If I am not mindful about it, and I'm doing work, because this isn't a perfect practice, we're not going to do it at every meal, but the meals we struggle with, for me, later in the day, I prioritize it, because if I'm not, I'm going to be hungry later at night, and it all has to do what I didn't do at dinner.
Yeah, which I think is such a great point, that you and I both have talked about this before, and this isn't the first time people are hearing this. If they've listened to us on Unsweetened SIO, or they've heard us in any other kind of interview with anybody, right? We often talk about volume addiction being something that has been true for us, and so thinking about how we help clients through some of these things, knowing we still have struggles ourselves, so we heard a little bit about volume for you, are there other struggles that you have personally that you're still working on?
Oh, I think for sure I can speak to the bit of restriction, and, not incorporating grains, because I was a little bit worried that they would make me carry a little extra weight. I did the experiment. I am not triggered by them. And this just also may be the case that maybe I did need to eliminate them for a year, right? Or 2 years, whatever my journey was. And then I'm able to tolerate them better. Maybe it would have been too addictive for me in the beginning, but it certainly isn't now. And to be willing to, like fruit, I feared fruit. Like it was, because it's nature's candy and it has fructose in it. And it's like this overload of information, especially when we're taking all these courses and we're hearing these different things and we interview these guests, and we're doing research on these guests before we even sit down with them. Some of their messaging can create misinformation, like in my brain, about what is true for me. And yeah, no, fruit again does not make me, I don't go eat one apple and eat the whole apple tree. It's just, but I feared that was the truth. And so I think 100% I have learned to be a little bit more willing to make my food plan more inclusive, because if I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, I want to have a lot of foods that I can eat. The other thing I struggle with is body image still, and I have to do a ton of work around body affirmations. And, one of the things I really had to work on was the mirror checking, and the constant negative thoughts that come up about different body parts, and examining my exercise routine. I just broke my toe and it was broken for like a month and a half, and I couldn't do my intense workouts. Did I freak out at first? But then I have to like ground myself and be like, okay, you can still go for a walk. And also, you're eating real food. You're not going to gain weight. This food does not make you carry extra weight when you are eating in the right amount. What does is binging on drug foods. That will, for sure. And that's why I used to exercise. So it is just this constant, that's probably the most noise I still hear, is like, when we went to Vegas, it's like, oh, I can't wear heels, because of my toe. But that makes me taller and leaner in my mind. But then I have to be like, okay, but I don't need the heels, because I'm okay in this body. And I used to wear the most uncomfortable clothes that I thought made me look skinny. And you know what? This trip, we just walked around and I was in flat sandals and I was in such comfortable clothes. It was the most enjoyable experience that I can remember being on a trip. However, I was noticing people in their high heels and their most uncomfortable outfits. And I was like, oh, that was me. That was me. And that person is probably not okay with how their body looks. And I'm not saying my body image is great now. I do things every single day to help grow that, but it's better than what it was. And I have, my mantra is I'm learning to love my body, not that like, I think my body is amazing. That's just not real. And that does not speak to me. And that there's going to be times when I'm having a bad day and I see a picture of myself that I'm going to go right back to that bad place. But that the next day, it'll be better. It'll be okay. How about yourself? What do you still struggle with, Molly?
No, I mean, I think I'm a human being, so I have lots of different struggles. Like I definitely have like my personal life that I have struggles in, and in my private life, but also, from that recovery perspective, I think the ongoing battle for me will always be that body image thing, just because I grew up with a parent, if you've ever seen the movie The Crow, which is one of my favorite movies ever, that he says like mother is the name for God on all children's lips. And when you have a parent that does everything in their power, intentionally or not, to keep you small, and uses things like what your body looks like against you at such a important time in our brain development, in our life, I think that, it will be an ongoing, I think till the day I die, this will be my thing. And so, yeah, it's the body image thing. And, it was so funny because we were walking around and I just remember going, oh my gosh, we walked 13 miles today, or we walked 12 miles today. And the last time I was in Vegas was 8 years ago, and I was 100+ pounds more, and I would have been dying way, way before 12. I mean, I could have kept going all those nights, days and nights that we were walking. I could have kept going, and I wasn't tired at all. My feet didn't hurt, like I wasn't swollen, like nothing. And I remember saying to you, like, oh my God, like, this is amazing. I don't even have to stop and think about where's the nearest bench to be able to sit down, or like, when are we going to stop and eat just so that I can have this rest? Like, that just wasn't, I could have just kept going and going and going. And, so my body image stuff has shifted more to, like you said, that like, there was that time when like I was at my lowest weight, pre-infect training, but I was doing an hour of cardio a day. I injured myself to where I could not walk. I was crawling everywhere for 6 months. And so without that, I cannot maintain the body weight that I was at. I just can't. And so these days I really work to say, like you said, learning to love my body, like, may I learn to love my body today, something along those lines. But it's more about what my body can do, and really having that hit home just recently when we were there, taking all those different walks and exploring, and so one of the books that I've been reading, I'm not nearly through it yet, but one of the books I've been reading is called More Than a Body. And then the subtitle is Your Body is an Instrument, Not an Ornament. And it's written by these twin PhD level, research individuals who really put a lot of time and effort into writing this book and talking about like how culture has set us up for what we are actually experiencing, and that it is a struggle because it's everywhere. Just like the surround marketing for the food is everywhere, these images are everywhere, and we're seeing it in real life, right? We're watching these women in these really uncomfortable looking outfits. Uncomfortable to us. Maybe they're comfortable for them. I shouldn't just make those assumptions, but I know I would be uncomfortable in those things. And I just have to think like, okay, when I'm wearing what I'm wearing, do I feel confident and do I feel comfortable? Because if yes, then that is what's good enough for me. Right. And do I feel comfortable and confident in my body? And I'm not always going to have that. Like, we are going to have those days, but then I have to remember when that voice comes to like talk myself back off the ledge. Like, just because you're having a body dissatisfaction day does not mean you get to beat yourself into the ground kind of deal. Right. So, it's an ongoing process. I mean, I think the truth is we're human beings, and just because we're professionals in this field does not mean that we are without our struggles. And I know that we both, we talk about it to each other. We have communities of people we talk to. I'm sure you talk to it, I'm guessing, to your therapist. I know I talked to my therapist about it, that kind of thing. And that's, I think, if anything, I want people to hear it's okay. It's so okay. We don't have to have it all figured out, and we can all heal at the rates that we need to heal. Just let us know how we can support you, because we get it. Yeah. So thinking about that, thinking about like what you would want people to hear. This interview or this conversation is going to air on Halloween, which, you know, we've been saying is kind of like the precursor to the holidays, which really we had Canadian Thanksgiving, which was kind of actually the first one, but Halloween seems to be a real sticky one for people. So what wise words would you have for anybody who's listening to this on October 31st?
So I would say if you have to get the candy to be able to hand it out, buy it the day of. Whatever you don't, you know, collect it, take it to a food bank or a youth program, something like that, give it back, get it out of the house. The house needs to be a safe place. Talk to your kids and maybe I know the switch witch thing is very common. You know, we're going to give all this, we're going to donate all this kids. Bring your kids when you donate, show them what's happening when you do this. And just make Halloween, it doesn't have to be about the candy. The drug foods, these big foods, made it about that. It's all just poison. If you really love your kids, I know this is a bold statement, but they don't need this. If you love them, like, give them a hug, you know, do something with them instead. You can still dress up, they can still collect, they need to be part of it. But, you know, even for some parents, that like give them a week of candy, right? Or something manageable that just, you know, allows them to see I just think about the excessive sugar comas that I used to be in, you know, and then it starts so young and it's just so not necessary. But I know it's hard, but just start the tradition at your house. Do this for your recovery. They are your kids. You are the parent. You be the leader in this, and it's not going to make them all have eating disorders. That's just nonsense. That's noise that the eating disorder world wants you to believe. It's just like you wouldn't just let your kids have a whole bunch of packs of cigarettes, you know, like it's no different, right? So just think about it that way and like make it, dress up, have fun, but not the focus on the food. It's the same with all the holidays, right? Thanksgiving as well. Can it just be we sit at the table and we enjoy our community? Why does it have to be about the pumpkin pie? Like, that needs to be the last thing it needs to be about. Anyways, that's my take on these holidays.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, there's a few things, you know, again, if those candies are your kryptonite, why are we even bringing them into the house? You know, is it possible to not even bring them into the house? I like to go to the dollar store and buy packages of like the glow in the dark, you know, like the little bracelets that you can like crack and the necklaces, right? And I hand out glow in the dark things, you know, like the little spider rings, stickers, that kind of, I mean, you can go to the dollar store and get lots of goodies to be able to pass out that are not actually, you know, are not drug foods. So that you're safe, right? And then, I mean, you're kind of like paying that forward with the children that are coming to your house and getting these things. I've also done it where I've put the bowl out on the porch and they touch it and I don't. But yes, with my children, you know, we're going to do the Switch Witch. They've asked for their thing from the Switch Witch, you know, that kind of thing. And they're not going to be a participant in the donating of that because the Switch Witch is going to come in the middle of the night, you know, kind of deal. But there are my dentists, you know, the kids dentists, the pediatric dentists around here do have a turn in your candy for, you know, like sometimes they give them money, sometimes they give them some kind of gift certificate or token of some kind. And that I would encourage, take your child to give that for sure. But I think ultimately this is another opportunity to not buy into that consumerism, right? So I was just reading something today and I don't know enough about it. I wish I would have done a little more research on it. That was talking about Halloween and the chocolate that's used to make the candy bars that we pass out are made. You know, it's on the backs of slavery out of Africa, like modern day, where they take young children and you know, families and people and pay them little to nothing, if at all, to harvest the cacao beans, all of those things. And so I was reading that today and I was like, holy cows, in and of itself, like I want to know more about that, because I know we've had Shun Foreman on the podcast before, and she really talked about, Sugarland, Texas. And if you guys haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it on the Food Junkies podcast, because it just opens your eyes to a whole new world, the underbelly really of all of this. And there's, my heart is too big and too soft to to contribute to some of that stuff. But I think, yeah, we need to make it not about the food, and we need to make it not about the consumerism. Speaking of, so American Thanksgiving is coming up, late November. And, I've been talking to my clients about it, like, start having turkey now. Joan Iflin has a recipe for, it's literally eggs and pumpkin, to make yourself like a little pumpkin flavored something, eggs and pumpkin. I don't even know like what she calls it, but there is no reason why that food has to be special to that day, which then further encourages us to overeat it, because, oh, it's special and I'm only going to get it today. Have turkey today until November 25th or whatever day it is. Have this pumpkin, whatever. I don't even care what day it is. I mean, that's how little I care about. I care about Thanksgiving. You don't have to save these things up for a special day and then binge, right? Like, it's just so built in us to do that, though. And we save the prime rib for Christmas, and we save the turkey, or the turkey for Thanksgiving, and the ham for Easter. And it's like, there is nothing stopping you from actually making those meals today, so that you don't have to have this story written in your head that says, go ahead and overeat it because this is the only day you're going to get it. So I would say, if anything, give yourself permission to eat those foods, not the drug foods, but those foods that are safe for you, that you would traditionally eat at Thanksgiving. The yams, the Brussels sprouts, the turkey, whatever. Give yourself permission to have a little bit, but between now and then, make a meal each week, something along those lines. So that would be it. What do you think, Clarissa? Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I just think that that's pretty much bang on. If you look at like us when we went to Vegas, it wasn't about the gambling, but we ate out like superstars every night, all abstinent foods, the steaks, all of like I would love to go and eat out all the time. But we just limit ourselves to like, I can only have this at this point. And then we overconsume on it. So, I mean, I regularly go to the butcher and I have a ton of steak. I eat steak like on the regular, like probably 2-3 times a week. And guess what? It loses its special value. I still love it. I still enjoy it, but it's not like, ooh, this is a steak night. No, like we need to be incorporating these real foods into our food plan on the regular, so that it loses that, this, I don't know, we've created this idea and this like fantasy around the food, and it's just, yeah, it's so not about that. It's not about that. It's like we already had our Thanksgiving, and I just sit at the table and I just look around, and I love my family so much, but yeah, for them, I think is all we had a living room, which was great to be able to sit in. Do you know where everyone was? In the kitchen. And, I was standing back and I was like, this is sad. And it's not my journey to fix them. But I do know that their priorities are very different than mine. And so just check out your family and see it from an outside, and not like you're missing out, but maybe you have something special that one day they will get to. What about you, Molly? Any final closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think ultimately, no matter what, the ultimate thing I think I would love for people to take away from this entire, month of interviews, this interview, the podcast in general, is that if you're just going to sit and listen to these things and you're not going to take action, it is going to turn you into an information junkie. It's going to make a lot of noise in your head, and you're going to be really confused, and desperation is going to start to surface, and it's going to feel like you're drowning, that you're going to take down the lifeguard with you who's coming to try to save you. So ultimately, I think you have to be informed, yes, but then you have to take action and do what's right for you. Eyes on your own plate. Eyes on your own plate. Look for people who have what you want and try to emulate that, but do it in a way that works for you. So if everybody's standing in the kitchen and that doesn't work for you, because how close and easy is it then for you to grab just a little sliver of this or a little spoonful of that? Be in the living room and ask people to join you there. And if they're unwilling, you can leave. You can go. And as much as we don't want to do that, that is you standing up for you, protecting you, and having boundaries. And that's self-love, right? So I think just ultimately it's, if you need help wading through this information, Clarissa and I are always going to be here to help you with that. But to know that you ultimately know what is right for you, make your head and your heart match. Make your inside voice and your outside voice match. Make your words and your actions match. Just make it all match to the best of your ability.
So. Yeah, that authenticity is key. And just, keep in mind all the quit sugar summits, the kick sugar summits. We made this summit because it's about addiction. Addiction is the disease that you have. Getting rid of sugar is not. And there's going to be so many people on there and fruit is bad and don't eat this at this time because your insulin, blah, blah, blah. Like recovery, addiction and recovery. That's what the focus needs to be. And that's what this food addiction summit was about. And all of the people that we interviewed are out here to just share this message with you. If you connected with any of them, reach out to them, just ask for help because we are all here. This is your community. So use it because all we want to do is help you. We are not too busy. We are here. And this is why we show up on these kind of things to make you guys understand, everyone understand that this is a disease, but this disease has a solution. That you don't have to, as I was told for many years, like, oh, you just have to deal with it. No, like you can fix it. You can fix it. Yeah, it takes work, but it's worth it. And I think that's the message.
Yeah, thank you so much, you guys, for joining us all month. And these videos will be available per Vera here in the Facebook group, but also on the Food Junkies podcast, foodjunkiespodcast.com. has its own separate page for these interviews as well.
And can you all go and leave comment on our iTunes?
Yes, like, subscribe, share it with people. We are trying, and download, because we are trying to get to 100,000 downloads by January 1st, 2022. We just think that would be a really neat, great gift to give to Vera, who has changed so many people's lives. We hear every day from people who say without Dr. Vera, they would still be stuck potentially or sick potentially. And Clarissa and I both owe her our recovery as well. So
absolutely.
Help us out.
Make a food addiction a mainstream topic. And that's how we do it, by building the show and creating the awareness. So thank you all for listening and joining us. And we'll see you on the Food Junkies podcast. Thanks for joining us today on the Food Junkies Food Addiction Summit.
If you would like to hear more, tune in every Friday to the Food Junkies podcast, available on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Audible, and anywhere else you listen to your favorite podcast. Subscribe so you'll never miss a show.
Don't forget to pick up a copy of Dr. Tarman's book, Food Junkies, which is available on Amazon.
If you have any additional questions, both Molly and Clarissa are food addiction professionals and work one-on-one with clients. Their websites and email addresses are available at foodjunkiespodcast.com.
As Vera always says, the power is ours.